The idea that only God knows the difference between a blessing and a curse means that they kind of look the same to us depending on where we're coming from and what we want. If we're feeling safe or our needs are met, it could be when we want to be alone, it feels like a curse that someone's knocking at the door. But when we're lonely, it feels like a blessing. So there's this other practice, which is like the idea of the dry lip is a message from the water. So like I said earlier, the sickness of the heart is a message from the lover. The mind trying to understand is a message from the ladder's top, which reaches to heaven. So patiently enduring the process of the dry lip is requires strength and faith. But the image that we get from Sufism is that there's this river, the stream that crosses the sand, and it has to let go of its gravity to be absorbed by the wind and moved, and then it could stay streaming on the sand. Otherwise, it will get absorbed into the sand. So we're like, the doubts are what cement the learning once it happens. Counterintuitively, because when we scramble to get into the boat, it could sink like a stone in the middle of the stream versus like the one that has no shelter, and is abandoned can make it across the stream. So it isn't necessarily how it looks. It's not necessarily the fanciest one or in any way, right? And that's the way to kind of get into these concepts about love. They're sort of bigger than us, and that's very helpful for this kind of outlook. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the idea of the Holy Spirit, because we say, maybe some people say, well, I understand Christianity and I'm not interested in, being a dwelling for something that is foreign to me. So, how could I trust anyone? So let's say, for example, Jesus, just in this case, him predicting his death, which was at 32. I mean, I'm 31. My birthday in February would make me 32. 32 is also the year of Lev, which means the heart in Hebrew. So working miracles is like, so this idea of what does Jesus represent, right? He predicted his death, like, so, he had his legacy lived on, regardless of whether you love him or hate him. So now talking about, and I don't mean to be blasphemous, I do not refer to Jesus as God. That is not the name of God. That was the name of a man. But then, everyone's aspects of God. So what do I mean when I say Holy Spirit? And I mean, it's because there's something called the carrier of the light. This is, the enlightened word. This is the word that is Chrima. And then there's the word, which is the logos, the law. So when we say Holy Spirit, the enlightened word, when we just say Holy Spirit, it's the word, right? It's the law. There's a spirit that's holy. Is there a spirit that's unholy? Is there a holiness that's not spiritual? But then we go to the enlightened word, and this means that whole spirit. What is this idea of lover and beloved? Is to be whole. Is to say, you have a piece of me in you. I'm not all of me until I'm with you, because I love you and my love for you is in you. But actually, the Holy Spirit means that we could love the Holy Spirit in them if we love the Holy Spirit in ourselves. That's this central point of Sufism, and it's going to start to make more sense when we think of it like that, because it beckons everyone to intimacy, to recognize the need for God in our life, and and points us to the beauty and gifts that we have, where we're not cursed, where we're blessed, and such as salvation, right? That we could be saved, and forgiveness, and that that there's redemption and that there's another chance. It's like for us from God, if we welcome and make space for communion, means community, right? The real words here versus what they've come to mean to others just as words. The real words here carry light, right? So it's like, how well do we hear? And the intensity of the calling depends on our ability to let go of anything that keeps us from God and keeps us from being open to discernment. There's an inner voice that if we're not listening to it because we're in that 99% as separate, and we're stuck in the 1% of lack or void, there's not enough. Holy Spirit, why do I have time for that? I want to go do that and do that and do that, and that all seems more important. But all of that really is ways to get to the love. We're trying to get to the love with all these paths. So the reason I mentioned Jesus is to say a legacy lives on. The Holy Spirit does more than a human leader can. Connecting with your Holy Spirit can love someone more than you can. someone connecting with the Holy Spirit can love you more than they can love you. That's this idea, is that there's this comforter energy, there's the leader energy, there's the conviction, there's truth bringer, life bringer. It touches us inside. When someone says, I'm moved, the Holy Spirit. Not blasphemy. We're not saying we're trying to put God into a nutshell or that all love, but we're saying that this section of experience is able to be called a miracle. We could say casting out our demons, which is like to face our fears, right? We stop living from a place of I can't, I shouldn't, and we start, I want to do this instead of I can't do that, right? And then of course we can have a following. It doesn't mean that they're following us, they're following the Holy Spirit, which tells them that being around us brings them up. When the tide rises, all the boats rise. We stop needing credit because we're just doing what our inner voice tells us in such a way that more love, there is more love. These challenges is to be open to new things, but not necessarily everything, right? And you can't see there, you have to earn, you can't see there. You really can't see in the dark. So in the Holy Spirit, you can't use your eyes that you have in your head to see. So that's why it's like the idea that we only see really like 1%, and that 99% is the strength and the creativity that comes from, I'm going to rise to this occasion and pretend that I see all the good even when I don't. And that's how we take care of our sickness, because whatever is stopping us, the dry lip is a message from the water, right? We can fly because if we realize that there's a million fruits being picked for us, and there's a ladder to heaven, we can go up. And we're not so afraid of falling. We're not afraid that we're not worthy, because we know that God knows the difference for our sake between a blessing and a curse. So we can rest assured that when we're listening to that voice in us that brings us closer to love, that we are doing the right thing. And finally, I'm going to share something called imago. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. But I never thought I could be in such a state, I could be in a state of equanimity and still have a partner. But maybe it's possible for me to be together with someone. And there was somebody who triggered a lot of this in me. I met him a few years ago. And, we're not dating each other now. We are at times in contact. So it can't be personal. But there was a version of this other half of me, my beloved, that went into him for me. And has gone into a different man after that, and has gone into somebody before that. What does this mean? How could the Holy Spirit, my masculine counterpart, go into another person, a man, and then I could interact with my beloved through that? Is my beloved shape-shifting? Who do I trust, right? This is a common issue with the imago, I don't know. So it's like, let's explore, who is he? So right now I'm going to leave it as a prompt, and I'm going to read what I wrote. And hopefully, we'll explore this more at a later date. But now I'll say it's like someone who shows up for me for a time period. It has never been somebody full-fledged with a commitment. But it's this version of somebody who checks all the boxes, leaves me wanting more. Everything is a beautiful fruit. And I'm going to read what it feels like. And it's not necessarily the person. It's this version of the ideal beloved that goes into, and it's usually from unresolved childhood issues. So I don't think anybody doing this practice is really saying I deserve all this. It's saying this is who I've been looking for, and I'm going to live with it. I'm just going to honor that this is who I've been looking for. So for me, it's somebody who's so dynamic, precise, brilliant, wise, charming, thoughtful, stubborn, open, bold, who I love and loves me, and it feels like home. And I'm reminding you, I have felt this with an individual, and it moved to a different individual. I felt that this is how I saw them. He's cute, he's beautiful, sexy, handsome, stable, masculine, strong and sturdy, patient, generous, builds me up, feeds me, neat and tidy, brave and courageous, growing, respectful, disciplined, warm and affectionate, cozy and nurturing. I don't need to hide that there's, if there's red flags, we have concerns, we deal with them. His eyes, his smile, his hands. We get to practice everything. Sex mastery, he's creative, inspired. Who I am is enough. He's hopeful and adaptive. He's independent, self-sufficient, buoyant and resilient, a good listener, an understanding ear. Who I am is not only enough, but I feel balanced, supported, and challenged with him. He's got great taste and wonderfully similar standards to what matters to me. He's grateful, godly, appreciative, loving, and sweet. Everything I learned from him that's new to me is gold. No topic is off limits, and I'm taking accountability with him. So I will leave off with there. I recommend considering this form of what we might call higher love and all the different ways that I've tried to show a pathway into it. And then as the practice, looking at who is your imago that has shown up in people that you've been head over heels with, completely in love with, and it felt real. It was real for you. There was a Holy Spirit living in them for the time that you loved them. Practice this.